You land a new job, there is that incredible initial rush of adrenaline, right? The honeymoon phase.
Where everything just feels full of potential. Oh, absolutely. The clean slate. Yeah, exactly. You should just set up, you bring in your favorite coffee.
You're learning the ropes, meeting the team. And part of that early process is filling out all the standard human resources.
This is onboarding paperwork, right? The endless form, the endless form. And you're feeling good, you're feeling secure. So you decide to be
completely honest. You disclose your ADHD medication because, well, the company culture deck literally asked for transparency.
And you want to start off with the right foot, which is what they tell you to do, right? You ask for a small accommodation, maybe just like written instructions instead of verbal ones. And then
exactly 5 days later, you get a vague calendar invite from HR. Yeah, the sudden quick sync, the dreaded quick sync. You walk into a room or
log onto a video call and you are terminated, just like that. And the reason they give, not a good fit. It is the absolute definition of the corporate
rumple. You are explicitly invited to be vulnerable by the very institution that employs you, and the moment you do, you are systematically punished
for it. Honestly, it makes my blood boil just thinking about it. And that nightmare scenario is the poor mission of our deep dive
today. We are unpacking a viral Reddit thread, which racked up over 12,000 upvotes, by the way. 12,000!
That really speaks to how common this is. It's terrifying. It exposed the seemingly widespread trend of workplace discrimination.
People are experiencing a phenomenon we can only really describe as weaponized transparency. Weaponized transparency, that's a very accurate
label for it. But look, we aren't just here to admire the problem or, vent about corporate America. Our goal is to equip you with the practical tools
to survive this, to understand the legal machinations behind it, and most importantly, to protect your self-worth when your authenticity is used
against you, which is vital, because the psychological damage of bad experience is profound. It is. So, to do that, we are
synthesizing this modern employment crisis with the ancient psychological frameworks of Stoic philosophers, as like
Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Seneca, which is such a powerful combination, because while modern HR departments and the Americans with
disability that are about relatively new constructs, the psychological warfare of having a reality distorted by someone empowered,
that is ancient. Yeah, human beings have been dealing with arbitrary authority for a very long time, millennia. And those Stoic philosophers built the ultimate
battle-tested framework for surviving it without losing your mind. They offer a very calm, grounded counter-narrative to that corporate
chaos. Let's start by dissecting the actual mechanics of this trap, though. The weaponized transparency. When you look at the thousands of comments in that Reddit thread,
a really the same pattern emerges. The timeline, specifically, as the timeline, it is almost always shockingly brief. Often just 3 to 5 days between
disclosing a neurodivergent condition like ADHD and sudden termination. Barely a work week. Right. And the users describe this profound
physical reaction to the firing, feeling completely blindsided, gaslit, doubting their own competence. But I have to play devil's advocate.
Get here for a second, because the skeptical part of my brain just have to ask. Good. Is it possible these employees actually were underperforming?
I mean, maybe they missed critical early deadlines or made a huge error, and they are just blaming the ADHD disclosure because, frankly, it hurt.
It's less than admitting they dropped the ball. It's a fair question, it really is, but when you look at the sheer volume of these identical timelines,
the underperformance argument just collapses. Why is that? Because, objectively speaking, 5 days is barely enough time to get someone's email again working,
let alone complete the mandatory training modules. It is mathematically impossible to establish a reliable baseline of performance
neurotypical or neurodivergent in less than a week. So what are we actually looking at? What you are actually seeing is a rapid deployment of a legal loophole. Okay, wait.
Explain that. How does that loophole actually work, mechanically speaking? Because firing someone for a medical condition is highly
illegal. Exactly. The Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, is a federal civil rights law. It makes it
illegal to discriminate against a qualified person with a disability. And HR departments and corporate lawyers know this intimately, or they aren't stupid.
No, they know they cannot legally put on a piece of paper, we are terminating this employee because they disclosed ADHD. That is a slam
dunk lawsuit. So instead of dealing with the minor friction of providing an accommodation, they utilize the probationary period, the 90-day
trial. Yes, where employment is usually at will. meaning you can be fired for almost any non-discriminatory reason. They
construct a parallel narrative immediately. They use legally defensible smokescreens like lack of cultural fit, or they cite vague, entirely
undocumented. So it's a race against the paper trail, basically. They're just pushing out neurodivergent talent the moment the request happens. Precisely. They rush to
sever the employment before the accommodation request can be formally processed and logged as the protected ADA action. They are
using at-will employment as an invisibility cloak for discrimination. Wow. That is so cynical. And that is where the psychological damage
happens, isn't it? Because they can't tell you the real reason. They have to convince you that your personality or your work ethic is the actual problem. That is
gaslighting. And the emotional devastation from that is profound. People walk away carrying this invisible scarlet letter,
convinced that their brain is fundamentally broken and that they are unemployable. There was one specific comment in the discussion that honestly felt like it stopped time for
me. Someone replying to the original poster wrote this, and it hits hard. They didn't fire you for being broken, they fired you for being honest.
That is the turning point, right? That it really is. They didn't fire you for being broken, they fired you for being honest. That one sentence completely
shifts the locus of failure. It takes the perceived character flaw, the internalized belief of I'm defective, my brain is wrong, and correctly
places the blame squarely on the employer's systemic prejudice. Yeah, you didn't fail at your job. You just failed to remain convenient for a really rigid
system. Exactly. A system that demands absolute conformity over transparency. Okay, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the person who just got that calendar invite.
You are sitting in your car in the parking lot. You are holding a cardboard box of your desk supplies. Your heart is pounding out of your chest.
Your rent is due next week. The physical panic of that moment. It's visceral. Your professional identity feels completely shattered.
How do you actually process that? How do you prevent that legal loophole from becoming your own internal monologue? Is it the exact
moment we need to introduce the Stoics? When you experience a profound, sudden injustice like a discriminatory firing, your brain's
immediate physiological response is to spiral. Of course, you obsess over everything you can't control. You fixate on the sheer
unfairness of it, the ignorance of your manager, the failure of the legal system to protect you. But Epictetus, a foundational
Stoic philosopher, developed a cognitive mechanism specifically for this kind of panic. He called it the dichotomy of control, where the sphere and
influence. I don't see this wasn't just like theorizing from a comfortable armchair either. I don't know. I mean, the man spent nearly 30 years
during actual slavery in Rome before gaining his freedom. When he talks about dealing with arbitrary, unjust authority, he literally
has the receipts. He absolutely does, and his mechanism is brilliantly simple, though incredibly difficult to practice in the moment. When the panic
like a thin, you mentally draw a hard line down the center of your reality. Okay, hard line, what goes on each side. On one side, you categorize what is entirely outside
your control. Your boss is ignorant about neurodivergence. The corporate policy of it allowed this. The HR rep who rubber stamped it, right?
If it just happened to you. Exactly. And on the other side of the line, you place the only thing you do control. Your internal response. And the
naming you attach to the event. Epictetus endured slavery for 30 years. You can rebuild. Epictetus endured slavery for
30 years. You can rebuild. That's a heavy thought. It reminds me of how Marcus Aurelius operated too. Another fantastic example.
He was a Roman emperor who wrote his famous journal, Meditations. Not in some quiet palace, but while he was physically on the front lines fighting these chaotic,
endless frontier wars and dealing with a devastating plague. He actively used the external chaos around him as the
friction needed to hone his internal clarity. Seneca provides another vital mechanism here. He was one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in Rome.
And through political machinations, he lost his immense wealth, faced exile, and eventually a death sentence. Well, tough not losing everything. But he
relentlessly practiced decoupling his identity from his status. He understood that his intrinsic human value did not fluctuate with his bank account or his political
standing. So if we apply Seneca's mechanism to the modern worker sitting in their car, your human value does not fluctuate with your employment
status. Precisely. The Stoics advocate for using these moments of loss to build what they call the inner citadel.
That phrase alone feels protective, the inner citadel. But how does someone actually build that when they feel completely
exposed and vulnerable? You build it by taking inventory of what HR cannot play in that cardboard box. The inner citadel is an impenetrable psychological
fortress. Its walls are constructed from your accumulated skills, your unique capacity for pattern recognition, your resilience,
and your lived experience. Okay, I love that. When a company escorts you out of the building, they deactivate your keycard, they wipe your laptop, they terminate your
health insurance. But they do not have the clearance to access your inner citadel. They cannot confiscate your competence. Build your citadel. No employer can take that
from you. Build your citadel. No employer can take that from you. Okay, I hear you, and I understand the theory, but I have to ask the really difficult question here.
On behalf of the frustrated modern worker, doesn't this border on, like, toxic positivity? Or worse, victim blaming?
I mean, telling someone who is just illegally discriminated against to focus on their internal narrative feels uncomfortably close
to letting the company off the hook. Are we just telling people to shrug, accept illegal behavior, and be zen about losing their livelihood? That is the
most common and frankly most dangerous misconception about Stoicism. Stoicism is never about passive acceptance of injustice.
Ever. It is about radical energy preservation. Okay, preservation, how so? The Stoics categorize an event like a firing as an
indifferent, meaning the event itself is just a fact in the world. It is neither inherently good nor bad until you attach a judgment here. So the
meaning you attach dictates whether you are destroyed by it or empowered by it. Exactly. Let's look at the mechanics of it. If you internalize the firing by saying, I'm
fundamentally broken, I am too difficult to manage, I will never succeed, you are destroying your own psychological capital. You're doing the discriminator's job
for them. Exactly. But if you recognize the event objectively, saying, my manager lacked the leadership tools to integrate a diverse
mine, and the company used a legal loophole to avoid accountability, you preserve your power. You aren't accepting the injustice.
You are quickly diagnosing the failure. Yes. The failure belongs to their corporate infrastructure, not your character. You protect your energy.
You can actually fight back, which brings us to the very practical reality of what happens next. Because philosophy might protect your soul, it does not pay your
mortgage. No, it's that you are job hunting, you are justifiably angry, and you might be seeking legal recourse. The documentation
process is critical here, absolutely vital. If you suspect you have been the victim of weaponized transparency, your first action outside
backlog should be factual documentation. Who said what? On what dates? What exactly was the timeline of your accommodation request versus your
termination? You strip the emotion out of the record and focus purely on the timeline. Because this is where you understand your legal rights. You have the
ability to file a formal complaint with the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They enforce laws against workplace discrimination.
Or you can consult an employment lawyer to review the severance decals. But doing that requires you to actively dwell on the injustice. Right.
You have to comb through the unfairness to build a case. So how do you pursue that legal strategy without letting it poison your psychological recovery? It requires a
strict mental downtraining because you're essentially splitting your reality. You're maintaining the lawsuit in one box, which requires focusing on how you are
wrong and keeping your self-esteem in a completely separate box so you can project confidence in new interviews. How does a human brain maintain a firewall
between those two things when the stress is peaking? You maintain that firewall by fundamentally changing your relationship to the concept of rejection.
If a company fires you for having an ADHD brain, they're not fixing a problem within their organization, that they are bleeding talent.
1 in 5 adults had ADHD. They lost talent, not fixed a problem. 1 in 5 adults has ADHD. They lost talent, not fixed
a problem. It's a massive demographic to just alienate. It is. So every rejection you experience, every awkward interview where
you have to artfully explain a sudden gap on your resume is not a verdict on your worth. It is simply data. It is information
gathering. I want to talk about how we present that data in those new interviews too. Because language shapes perception. It
absolutely does. So many neurodivergent professionals go into interviews carrying the trauma of their last firing. And they end up essentially
apologizing for how their brain works. They use deficit language and syntheticus. Yeah. They say things like, I'm sorry I have ADHD, so I'm really
bad at following verbal directions, and they need you to write things down for me. Which immediately signals to the interviewer that you are a liability that requires extra management.
Rather than an asset. Right. I think about the ADHD brain like a high-performance Formula One race car. Oh, that's an interesting analogy. Think about it.
An F1 car is a marvel of engineering. It is built for incredible speed, extreme responsiveness, and elite performance
on a track. But if you take that exact same $1 million machine and force it to drive in stop and go 15 miles per hour
commuter traffic, it's going to stall out. It's going to stall. It's going to overheat. It's going to look completely broken. When you go into an interview, you shouldn't apologize
that your Formula One car isn't a Honda Civic. You just need to ask if they have a track. That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. Let's look at how
that changes the script in an interview. Instead of apologizing for a deficit, you state your working conditions as a professional standard. How would you phrase that?
you don't mention the ADHD as a warning. You simply say, to ensure maximum efficiency and accuracy in my deliverables, I work best with written
instructions rather than ad hoc verbal requests. Wow. The power dynamic completely flips there. Completely. The first example is an apology
for an inherent flaw. The second example is an expert calmly communicating their optimal operating conditions. You are literally handing
the employer the instruction manual on how to get the highest possible return on their investment in you. Exactly. When you keep your self-esteem
protected in your inner citadel, you no longer feel the need to grovel for basic accommodations. You negotiate them as tools for mutual
success. But that mindset shift requires you to actively filter out the environments that just want a Honda Civic.
Once you stop apologizing for your neurodivergence, you transition from playing defense to playing offense. You start using that painful firing
as your most valuable strategic intelligence. You now possess the blueprint of exactly what a toxic environment looks like. You know the red flags
intimately. You really do. You know that when a company emphasizes rigid communication styles, or uses putative policies
around time tracking down to the minute, or constantly throws around vague buzzwords like protecting company culture, they're often just demanding your attention.
Typical conformity, which means during the next interview process, you are interviewing them just as aggressively as they're interviewing you. You can ask highly
specific, direct questions, like what? Can you walk me through what your accommodation process looks like for new hires? And then
you do not just listen to the answer, you watch their physical reaction. Body language is huge. If the hiring manager squirms or
gets defensive or pivots to a non-answer about how, everyone here just works really hard, your inner citadel's alarm bells should be ringing.
That's the smoke detector going on. Precisely. But if they lean in and say, we have a dedicated neurodiversity resource group and a streamlined
portal for ergonomic or cognitive accommodations, you know you found a team that operates on a different level. This is also why we are seeing a massive
migration of neurodivergent talent away from traditional corporate structures entirely. When the system repeatedly proves hostile,
people look to alternative paths. Consulting, freelance work, and entrepreneurship are exploding with ADHD professionals. And let's look at the neuroscience
of why that happens. In a rigid 9-to-5 corporate office, a trait like hyperfocus is heavily penalized. If you miss a low
priority meeting because you were deeply engrossed in solving a complex problem, HR writes you over time blindness. Right, but if you take that exact same
logical trait into freelance work, hyperfocus allows you to enter flow states and produce deep work that totally
outpaces your competitors. The same applies to pattern recognition. The ADHD brain is notoriously understimulated, meaning it is
constantly scanning the periphery. Taking in data about a neurotypical brain automatically filters out to maintain focus. In a boring step
meeting, this looks like you are distracted or not paying attention. But in entrepreneurship or strategic consulting, that exact
same peripheral scanning allows you to see an impending market shift or connect two disparate ideas before anyone else in the industry.
It drives rapid and it'll sharp. The neurological trait does not change. The environment changes. Exactly. I love the idea of creating your own environment. I really do.
But we have to be grounded about this. There's a heavy dose of survivorship bias in the advice to, just go start your own business. That's invalid critique.
Not everyone has the risk tolerance, the capital, or the safety net to quit the corporate world. Many people desperately need
steady health insurance and a predictable paycheck. What happens to the person who has to stay in traditional employment, where these highly evolved
ADHD-friendly cultures feel like rare unicorns? This is where the Stoic filter becomes your most practical career tool. Even if you must
remain within the confines of traditional corporate America, this traumatic setback acts as a clarifying lens. How does it clarify things?
It forcefully strips away the illusion that masking your traits will protect you. It won't. When you get fired 5 days after being honest, it bronzes down the
exhausting performance of pretending to be neurotypical. You realize how much baseline caloric energy you are spending every single day just try to camouflage
yourself to make other people comfortable. Precisely. You are spending 40% of your daily cognitive energy trying to force a Formula One car to idle quietly
in traffic. Once that illusion is gone, you are liberated to negotiate from a place of deep self-knowledge. You stop trying to
force a square peg into a round hole. You stop trying to squeeze yourself into kings that value arbitrary processes over
actual results. Even within massive traditional corporations, there are always microcultures. There are specific managers,
specific project teams who care exclusively about the quality of the output, not whether you fidgeted during the video call. The paperwork
might have called it a termination. But you have the agency to call it a liberation. It is liberation from the deeply corrosive performance of
being someone you are not. That is the ultimate cognitive reframe, when you truly internalize that you were never a broken employee, but rather a
high-performing individual placed in the wrong operational environment. HR departments completely lose their power to dictate your work. Let's bring all these threads
together. We started by examining a very real, very terrifying modern scenario, doing exactly what is asked of you, disclosing your needs in good faith,
and being swiftly and unfairly pushed out using a legal loophole. We looked at how companies manipulate the probationary period to hide discrimination under the
guise of cultural fit, and how that gaslighting can temporarily shatter your professional confidence. But we also broke down how applying the ancient
mechanics of Stoic philosophy, specifically Epictetus's dichotomy of control in the construction of your inner citadel, allows you to halt that
downward spiral. You separate the employer's systemic failure of leadership from your own intrinsic character. You document
the facts meticulously, you utilize the EEOC or legal channels if it makes strategic sense, but you fiercely guard your self-worth as a
fortress completely untouchable by any corporate entity. A firing based on your narrow divergence is a reflection of their operational limitations.
It is not a reflection of your flaws. And by embracing that reality, you stop apologizing for how your brain works, and you start aggressively filtering
for the environments that actually deserve your talent. Whether that's entrepreneurial or Wiccan enlightened corporate keens, which leaves us with this final thought.
Think about the parts of your working style that you constantly apologize for, or the traits you expend massive amounts of energy trying to mask just
to get through the workday without drawing attention. What if, instead of spending all your energy trying to dilute those traits to merely
survive in the wrong environment, you spent that exact same energy finding the one environment where those traits are your greatest superpower?